Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? This week we have news on just how safe vaccines are for teens. Information about whether or not the booster shots are being encouraged and just why they're being advised. The spread of yet another disease in America, this time plague. The discovery of a bizarre and uncomfortable looking creature. Whether or not Neanderthals had blood typing just like the modern humans, and a supernova that has now been captured in detail, something that is both amazing and interesting to see. The timestamp for these and other news items can be found in the description box below. Starting with CCP virus related news, and specifically about the efficacy and safety of the Pfizer vaccine and teenagers. The current plan is relatively straightforward in America. Having vaccinated the elderly, then the majority of the US adult population who is so far willing, the next stage is obviously to give teenagers vaccines, and work your way down through the ages until everybody has theoretical immunity, or at least everybody who can be immunized. Approximately 9 million teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17 have received the Pfizer vaccine in America. Admittedly, that is the only vaccine they could have received. Of the 9 million teens vaccinated, 91% experienced a minor reaction. This was primarily soreness in the site where they were vaccinated, which, frankly speaking, should be no surprise. You've just been stabbed with a small needle and a relatively small but substantial volume of fluid deposited under your skin. 9% of the children involved experienced what were considered serious side effects, and 4% of these developed a heart problem, specifically myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. This is at least according to the CDC data released in response to this study. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle, and while it can impinge upon function of the heart, it is also the same effect seen by many viral infections, like the CCP virus. So, you either have the case of a known risk of an adverse effect, or the unknown risk of a viral infection. The remainder of the symptoms included things like chest pain, fatigue, and shortness of breath. Just about all of these other symptoms are fairly standard for vaccines. What is interesting when we look at the vaccination rates and the possible side effects versus infection by the CCP virus is the weird juxtaposition of males versus female side effects. In the case of females, they have 21 times more risk of being infected and developing myocarditis if they are not vaccinated, and it's 6 times higher in males. At least with regards to the CCP virus, the ongoing risk so far has been that men tend to develop more issues, and particularly things like cytopenia and clotting. This is generally true of most vaccinations, in fact. It's safer to be vaccinated than it is to try and acquire natural immunity. That's because the risks associated with a vaccine and immunization in general are predictable, controllable, and able to be mitigated to some degree. This allows someone who has been vaccinated to do so in a safe and efficacious manner without the risk of any of these side effects that could come randomly from natural immunity. With more individuals likely to be vaccinated in America, the announcement of an intention to roll out booster shots is interesting. It's not so much interesting because the booster shots themselves are something unexpected. They were somewhat expected in the long run. What is interesting is how the World Health Organization has said that they think America is wrong to do this now in the way they are. The plan is to provide either Pfizer or Moderna vaccines to then bolster immunizations from things like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. This is expected to occur somewhere around the 6-month mark after the first vaccination occurred. Given that America and other countries are the primary place of production for most vaccines that have a better than 50% efficacy, the challenge is based on one simple thing. These countries already have the vast percentage of their population vaccinated. The global average for having at least one shot of the vaccine is 75% across the entire globe. In developing countries, this nosedives to 1%. That means there's a huge difference, and that's what the World Health Organization is arguing. Developing countries haven't yet received enough vaccines to protect them, and America now wants to start giving itself booster shots. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros said, "I understand the concern of all governments to protect their people from the Delta variant, but we cannot accept countries that have already used most of the global supply of vaccines using even more of it." End quote. The problem with this rationale is that it's not a global supply. It's a country supply and, generally speaking, private companies' supply. Who they choose to sell it to and how is a matter of private business. Further to that, countries like America are distributing vaccines to other countries, largely free of cost, and in very large numbers. The fact that they're further using their own resources shouldn't be seen as a major issue. Not only is America doing this though, Israel, France and Germany are following the same procedure of issuing booster shots. Next we go to an interesting case study, that of a woman who developed a mass under her armpit, which then started lactating after giving birth to her child. The case study involves a 26-year-old Portuguese woman. After giving birth, they found the mass developing 2 days later. This is in line with what you would expect if the mass is made up of the same material as the breasts are. In fact, that's what she was diagnosed with, a condition called polymastia. In this case, it's effectively an accessory or extra breast. The location of the armpit is not an uncommon occurrence and where they're generally found. Although generally benign, the location should also be monitored when any other breast screening is done, as it can behave just like regular breast tissue and turn cancerous. Going from bizarre case studies to novel diseases, and not just the viral kind. People in California are being warned to be careful of plague, that is bubonic plague, Black Plague, the Black Death. It follows discovery of chipmunks in the Tahoe area having this particular disease, which is interesting. It's not uncommon for animals to pick up diseases like this. Across America, prairie dogs often develop plague and will carry it. It goes from the prairie dogs to humans via fleas. That particular vector for infection with plague is why it generally occurs in places like New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, California, Oregon, and parts of Nevada. The average rate of its incidence is somewhere around 7 cases a year, so not exactly common. Based on this, the local government agencies are now investigating just how many issues might come from this and if there is a risk to the public due to infection. In other animal-related news, there's a discovery of a weird and somehow familiar looking animal. It's a limbless amphibian, as in similar to a frog. This particular group is called caecilians, and they are worm-like amphibians that have been around for many, many hundreds of millions of years. The problem is they haven't really ever been found in the wild. There are a few that have been picked up, and efforts have been made to try and keep them in good health to study. But overall, it was thought that they were more or less a dead or dying species. That's why the discovery of this recently deceased specimen was so interesting. The strange-looking creature can grow up to about 1.5 meters or 5 feet. And for all the fact that they look rather disturbing, they're not a particularly aggressive species. In fact, arguably they are quite benign. The only caveat to that is that While looking like a snake, they're very different except for the presence of venom-like glands. The discovery of one particular specimen, as seen here, is novel, but it doesn't really demonstrate much of anything, as they have no idea how it showed up where it is, or why. In other animal-related news, but much closer to our own, Neanderthals are slightly more interesting than we previously thought, and certainly closer to humans. They had blood types. Just the same way the humans had the ABO blood typing system, Neanderthals appear to have also had different kinds of blood. In fact, genetic screening appears to indicate they had the same ABO blood typing system, along with our positive and negative rhesus typing. Going from relatively ancient history to even more ancient history, the observation of an exploding star billions of light years away. The process of light getting to us from the supernova which occurred has taken just that long, and if not for the fact that the now defunct Kepler space telescope hadn't been facing the right place at the right time, it never would have been seen. But that's what's now being discovered by researchers going back through records of the data held by the Kepler space telescope, and the discovery of this very interesting phenomena, and the fact that we were able to record it. The phenomena in question was only able to be captured because Kepler was one of the few telescopes that was dedicated to taking images of a very narrow area of space for an extended time frame. The small cone of vision that it had would be focused on for 40 days at a time, continuously recording images. Eventually, after this 40 days, it would move on to the next location, but that's why they were able to capture this particular supernova. The fact that it sat there watching it, not only from the beginning of the explosion, and even beforehand, but to well after, that gave them all the information they could possibly have had for this. Information that may provide some guidance onto just what products these supernovas produce. For instance, will a star like our own, when it eventually goes supernova, produce particular products? And will these be something we can then follow if it's in another star, in another solar system, to figure out just when things were developing as far as planets go? The information is incredibly important, and information that, to a certain degree, we have been missing for the most part until now. That's all the news we have for you this week. Thank you for watching. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.